Okay, so now I'm sharing my screen and it's visible, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's start. So I think we are going through some historical days, historical moments. I think many of you have experienced this, watched this live coverage of SpaceX launch, the Dragon human capsule launch to or launch attempt to the International Space Station, which didn't happen and which is due to happen tomorrow actually, which has been scrapped due to the bad weather. So actually, SpaceX mission marks a lot of, let's say, a lot of milestones in the history of spaceflight. Actually, this is the first human private spacecraft which is going to be launched into space, and it is actually the first. It represents also a kind of breaking point, a sort of milestone in the history of let's say the design of space structures, the design of vehicles, and this makes me think one more time about the architecture, the concept of architecture, and the design of vehicles. So they always have been in a sort of tension. So we as architects are fascinated, to say the least, by the physicality of these structures, by the design of these structures, how say innovative, or let's say how well articulated they are. But it's sort of I always feel like it's a sort of a greasy stick that I cannot just get a good grapple on. This was my feeling as an architect. So they are also products of design, say, well, design processes, but they are different products actually. And so when you're just dancing in this environment of vehicle design, like I am doing for about some time, they always ask you what the hell you are doing here as an architect in the design of structures of vehicles, let's say. So the word architecture means something to us. It awakens a solid concept in our mind. But when it comes to vehicle architecture or architecture in other systems like space flight, it means something totally else. This is the interior of the SpaceX Dragon capsule, the Human Dragon, I think, is an official name. Dragon Human, I think. Uh, and people have been working on this design for a couple of years. So I know that the star designer Daniel Simon has been involved in the design of some elements like the seats, and the chief designer of SpaceX, who is responsible for this capsule, is an architect. So things begin to click to each other, making a big piece of the puzzle. So though, as I said before, so the architecture, the concept of architecture means totally something different, something else to these people, to the people in human spaceflight. So what they understand from architecture is the mission architecture, or the architecture of their transport systems, which is visible here in the slides. So this is a sort of scale comparison of the lineup of SpaceX rockets compared to the space shuttle, which actually they're huge pieces of machinery. But the funny thing is, what we are talking about right now is the Dragon human capsule, which sits atop of the big stick, the big firing stick, the big firing rocket over there. So architecture, as we understand it, has a lot way to go to get fully integrated into the space systems. So as we move forward, there's another comparison. So the thing on the right hand side, which is larger, the capsule is the new Human Dragon capsule, and the one on the left hand side is the Apollo capsule, which transported the Apollo astronauts to the moon, and that this is a capsule which came back from the mission. This is the only piece that comes back from the mission. There's a big, huge F-word rocket that goes up into the space, burning, well, tons of fuel. And what comes down is this little capsule containing the people in it. So the new capsule is a bit similar to this, though larger. So if you go back to that slide, so it has a classy, roomy feeling inside. So we will have, well, or SpaceX would like us to think that we will have more roomy places, sort of places, capsules with a lot of space inside, a lot of volume, and with clean surfaces. But, well, I'm a bit, well, skeptical about this, as things turn out to be in a different way. So this is the Soyuz capsule, one of the well, recent photos. Well, it was one of the last missions, I think. This is the workhorse of the Russian, spaceflight agency, Roscosmos, which it used to transport all the astronauts and cosmonauts to the space station. And actually, the NASA people, the American astronauts or the European astronauts, were buying seats in these vehicles to be able to reach the station. So you can see the badge. Well, so the reality, I mean, there is always a fiction or a design about the space structures, the vehicles, let's say. But the reality is something different. So you get stuffed into a sort of small capsule with a lot of hardware and equipment, or even with well, provisions, which are due to be carried to the space station. Well, this lady is the senior, let's say, the chief architect of the space vehicle designs back in the 60s. Actually, so when we were talking about the Russian space program, the human space flight program, I think the quality of the spaces, the architecture inside the capsules can be credited to this lady. Her name is Galina Balashova. So I think she was also covered, her work was covered in one of the past design biennales in Istanbul. So a very humble person, speaks very plain, and well, she's not boasting about her work. She's speaking very plain about her work, what has been done in those years. Actually, it was pretty plain, also in that terms, because what she was given was a sort of perimeter, a kind of well, you can say a steel ball, and what she was asked for is to design some interiors, including the color code for this, or even worse than this, she was given the exterior of the space vehicle, which is carefully designed by engineers, not the architects. Engineers were the seniors, the masters of this design. And you can see that from that stupid tin box. I think in this case, this is the Mir space station exterior. She was only asked to place the the graphic, the Mir. So it says Mir here with these acrylic letters. She was only asked to place this logo on this capsule. So we have to say that the work for architects in the design of the vehicles was pretty limited. And the interesting thing is, the Russians are still using this proven design. This capsule layout has been uh, has been working for flying for let's say I think it has been flying since the beginning of 1960s. So if you think that the first human spaceflight by Yuri Gagarin was at the beginning of 60s, So this configuration is somewhat the same since those years. So people have still have been transported via these vehicles up into the space, and the in terms of vehicle architecture, I mean the order of things and the architecture of the system, it hasn't changed so much because it was just designed to work, and it was proven to work, and this machine has a computer power which is akin to your, I think, the watch or to your calculator. It is not even your mobile phone in terms of computing power, but it still works. And people are always do they tend to stay on the safe side, and they don't tend to change the order of things, the proven things. And this was one of the other drawings of Balashova. And I have been fascinated by this lady as I was working for let's say a project for a European Space Agency, and my whole set of work was based on drawings, hand drawings, like she did. She was my great inspiration. And the color codes, which is a green for the bottom, let's say floor. Actually, you don't have a floor in space in the zero G environment. And the beige, or let's say the yellow for the sidewalls and the blue for the ceiling, is still being followed in the Russian space flight program. So as I said before, they always fiction about the architecture, about the design, the quality of spaces in space. So the fiction was this still comes from that famous film movie. I think you should all remember, which was made in 1968. I think the 2001 Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, and this was the way people, or let's say Stanley, Mr. Kubrick, was imagining the atmosphere, the feeling of space, which would happen in 2001. But the reality is always different, which is, let's go on. This photograph was shot in 2001. This is the reality in 2001. So the 2001 space reality was not the beautiful styled furniture and space and that sexual object, the lady, and that handsome guy, Mr. Floyd, Dr. Floyd, but it was a sort of pretty messy and human environment that you will just feel yourself comfortable. So with all this flying, chicken ham and some Tabasco sauce flying over the place, and you have some postcards, and there's a cross. There is a sort of a Russian cross over there. This is the Russian module, to be precise. But people just tend to customize their surroundings and the architecture. So it is not it is not an easy thing to make a final design. So when we get back to that space, the clean cut SpaceX vehicle, it is not easy, or maybe it's easier to imagine what it will turn out in a couple of years when being used over and over again. So, and another piece of reality, this picture is from the Apollo lunar module, which just landed on the moon 6 times. Yes, 6 times. And this is from the final flight, and this is the Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon, with his dirty outfit, suit. And I met the other astronaut who used to tell us that the interior was smelling. It was thinking of something like gunpowder because of all this lunar regolith, which is extremely dangerous for the human lungs. But they didn't know it by then, but they just inhale it. So the reality is just, or the natural feeling in a spaces is that it gets dirty. You just don't act or just go around in a space like you're in a science fiction movie, but in a sort of dirtier environment. So all this information gives us an idea about how small the role of architects or the designers in this stuff are. But this is about to change. So this was the case in the designs in the vehicles that were designed by primarily by engineers or by engineering constraints. So these vehicles didn't, they barely had a origin of, or they barely had the center of user. They were barely user centered. I think they were not user centered. They were just mission oriented vehicles designed and built by the company that gave the cheapest bid. So the lowest bid, and it gives a horrible feeling to the astronauts, I'm sure. So the feeling in these vehicles. As you see, so I'm just taking you to space. Now I'm just taking you to the Earth, and it will go to space again. So if you look at this German submarine in the big war, so you will see the same thing. So you're practically, the crew was practically stuffed into these containers, and these containers were just built, designed and built to work. So you had to live in a big, in a complicated forest or jungle of machinery. So these machines were not designed to, to make people happy, let's say, to give them a good feeling in their interiors, but they were just designed to operate in their own environment. So coming back to architecture, so all this, different things gives us a landscape of, or a scape of the concept of the vehicle design. And this is our famous guy, Le Corbusier. He always just referring to this tension between the vehicles and the architectural designs. Actually, he was showing us some emotions in this sense. I think you can all recall his words from the towards one architecture, in architecture, where he openly accuses clearly accuses the world of architectural design with a degree of, well, uh, low technology which is not deserved. So he always gave us the impression, or he always assured us that we deserve better architecture, better architectures where design and technology are integrated better to each other, at least at the level of the cars and the aircraft and the ocean liners. So he was very fond of giving these poses with his famous Wazen car, or he was photographing, or he was letting his buildings, his designs like this in this the Siedlung building in Stuttgart. So he was fond of seeing his architecture in harmony or in contrast with these technically superior products of the modern world. So he went so far to publish this book. The aircraft is the English name, but I think the original name is L'Avion Accuse, which stands for in French the aircraft indicts, is accusing, like the j'accuse of Germinal, right? So it's a famous, or it's a historical accusation, indiction of this city with clumsiness, ineffectivity, inefficiency, and with the accusation of being a waste of material, and the city is being accused with the crime of making people unhappy and unhealthy. So he says the airplane embodies the purest expression of the human scale and the miraculous exploitation of material. Okay, so he is he's praying to this god of machinery, the high technology, which is indeed fascinating. But actually, though he is just trying to make a connection between the architecture and the design of the vehicles, he is just tearing them apart and letting the world of architecture admire the world of aircraft and high technology. So uh, this tension is, I think, is about to be resident or about to be past. Is about to be history, because so the modern city is so complex and so complicated in many senses, and it just includes so many parameters and so many components like people, us, or so many social layers and layers of technology and economy and other things. So which you can see in this picture. So this is a small picture, I know, but if you can somehow look closely at this picture, this is I just made this shot from my window. This was the adjacent plot. They just destroyed, they just demolished the old beautiful apartment building there to build a new one. Now the new one is already there. And as I was watching this spectacle, I noticed something. So maybe you will also notice this. In the cabin of that demolition machine, of this excavator, there's a guy sitting, and this was Sunday. The building site was not operational. The guy was not working there actually. Then I figured out at the following weeks that this guy, the operator of the machine, used to come here to. This is a nice neighborhood, so people go around and take drinks and stuff, especially at the weekends. I noticed that this operator used to come here to spend time in that cabin on Sundays to this beautiful environment. So he is with his machine practically sitting on top of the hill. So he has his own space, which he feels comfortable. So what I'm trying to say is the thing with being stuffed into machines is about the change design and with the people we just experience it. So going back to space, to Mars, our next destination. So there are other ways of approaching design, architecture, and vehicles, machines. So now they are just getting into a sort of hybrid composition, like in this like in this image. You can see it here. This image is one of the winning designs of the famous NASA competition for the 3D structures, for 3D print structures on Mars. And this group of people, a couple of, and some of them are my friends, my colleagues from this field. And they came up with this proposal to use some pieces of elements, some pieces of units, some units from the existing space station. So practically they are second-hand pieces of machinery, like that one, the cupola sitting on top of the 3D printed structure. And some of the machinery is new, of course, like that pressurized rover, that vehicle with the wheels is being attached to the base, and you get a sort of a nice composition of old pieces of machinery being reused, upcycled here, and so fresh built structures from Martian soil, which are just heated and 3D printed, and they make up a sort of operationally really efficient environment, which is also taught in also in terms of human comfort, and so to make up a good design. So as you see also from this picture, this is just the design, of course. And the top part, the cupola, is being taken out from the International Space Station at the end of its life and transported there. These elements are called çıkma malzeme in Turkish. So we just came across them a lot during the transformation of buildings. They used it, like the one next to my building. They're just demolishing old buildings to build new ones, but they are still using their window frames and door frames, which prove to be valuable for other buildings. So well, the future is also the future of design and architecture in terms of vehicle design and space structures is pretty hybrid. So people will try to involve as many pieces as possible to create well, human-friendly, well, user-friendly environments, and to come up with good designs. And as last, I would like to show you this design, which is a product of my own design team. This was presented at the Space Architect Conference a couple of years ago by my student, by my team colleague, Miguel. So this design came up with the idea to design things inside out. Well, to take the person, the well, the user into the origin, into the center. Sorry.
Tuvalete gidip geliyorum ama.
To take the user in the center and then just radiate the design inside out. This is completely the opposite approach, the contrary approach to the old, well, to the old mentality where you have a limited space and they give you the steel ball and just design the interior for this. This time we are proposing to design, getting the crew into the center and then extending it to the outer crust, and it just gives us a sort of very simple configuration, which is spherical, and the inside the inner sphere is totally plain, and it's covered. The surface is covered with all LED, organic LED screens, and which reflect the exterior, the surrounding in Mars. And you have some series of crusts, and the first crust in the first layer is this well, reflective surface and some well hatches, and the next crust is a sort of well, is in hardware crust, which just contains the hardware and the machinery and the systems that will provide life support to the vehicle. And it's a sort of free-flowing well ball inside, so you will just steer this vehicle by just running in it. And the outer crust is, of course, as you can imagine, it is inflatable. So this is a sort of rolling mobile habitat designed for Mars environments. So it's almost well, as a shape, it is almost identical to the ones Balashova was allowed to design the interiors. Look what she was trying hardly to achieve. So it's just, so people had no experience in space back in those years, and they were just they were told to design some well bookshelves and some couches, and which none of them would work in the space environment. So these were the drawings of our concept. So you have this reflective interior, then the hardware crust, and lastly you have this inflatable outer crust. So we had some details for it. Well, I think I have covered some structures, and this is the last image. We are still thinking on the structures and the architecture of vehicles. Maybe I will talk about them in an upcoming online event. This image is from one of our latest works. It's an underwater drone, a competition winner, but as a product of well, innovation in design, vehicle design and vehicle architecture. It's the subject of another, I think, webinar. Thank you very much. I can take questions if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Kürşad, because it's really taking us somewhere else than where we are most of the times. It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking at, I may have a question. So
sure.
you showed SpaceX launch. They are not launched though.
Yes.
The test demo launch, we could say, the cancel launch, and you show the interior. So, looking at the SpaceX event, they are using a extremely huge machine to go to the space, and they're taking it back to the Earth with an extreme precision. The size of the rocket is much larger than a lot of buildings, and
Yes.
is flying. Is going to the moon maybe, or going to the space and coming back super precisely, landing on a drone
Ship.
type
Yes.
of platform. It's an extremely different place looking at what we are doing with the architecture. So
Yes.
what I mean is like Corbusier. I think I'm more on the side of the Corbusier. We are doing really poorly with our buildings. So do you have? We know a couple of reasons, but do you have an idea that why architecture is in this shape that is so far away from being perfect?
Well, it's very profound. I think it
Hard,
has a very well, yeah. It
it's a
goes
very
very
hard
deep
question.
into deep into some other layers.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, the machinery, or I think it's about being a subject in the politics, or in the social. It's about being a part of the real world. I think architecture has never been a real
Mhm.
player in the big world, in the big life out there. You always say there's a life out there. Go out the door and live it. I think
Mhm.
architecture is I think it tends to. I think we tend to keep things somehow reserved to a sort of limited environment. I don't know, though it is a part of our daily life. So we go in the spaces, we use them, and they look like they are the products of design and architecture. But the concept of
Mhm.
architecture has always been detached from the concept of designing things, products for everyday life. I don't
Mhm.
know. I think it is a sweet and sometimes bitter tension between them. I
Mhm.
don't know. I think he will just be fascinated to his bones, Le Corbusier, if he solved these, or maybe he will just say, "Yeah, I said it many years ago. It's the same thing," and you
Mhm.
still have that huge gap between your pieces of high tech equipment and your products
Mhm.
of architecture. Well, but we are not allowed to forget that these things are limited in numbers. There's
Mhm.
only there are only 2 or 3 prototypes of this machine,
Mhm.
and they have huge funds behind them.
Mhm.
But when we're talking about architecture, we are talking about something ubiquitous. Well, it is millions in numbers,
Mhm.
like, right? So when we're talking about school buildings, we can talk about hundreds of thousands probably, or tens of thousands around the world. So I think it's not totally fair to compare them. Well, and they have the state and the political power behind them, and it makes them very dirty.
Mhm.
Space flight is directly linked to actually nuclear technology, to say.
Military.
Yes, if you have nuclear warfare capability, it means that you are a part of the space flight
Mhm.
program. So, I mean, these programs have huge funds and
Mhm.
political power behind them. So
Mhm.
maybe it's good for architecture, our world,
Mhm.
not to have those big toxic funds and power behind us. I don't know. From time to
Yeah.
time, architecture also
Good
plays
way
with
to
it.
look at it.
Yeah, I'm trying
Yeah.
to be optimistic about it, but they are not. I think they won't be in big tension, like we are speaking in right now, in the future. So they will just close in to each other, I would say.
Thank you. I mean, this is a question that is that cannot take exact answers, but I think you broadly covered the subject. Thank you for the inspirational talk, and we let you free.
I have a little speculative question.
You back? Yes.
And
Go ahead. I think you have
Yes,
4 minutes.
there's no time limit anymore.
On
Zoom canceled it, so it's.
Oh, great.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let's go ahead. Go ahead. I think one of our guests is also trying to ask something. So.
Okay. Do you hear
okay.
me?
After.
İsmail Bey mi? Kim o?
Yeah, it's me. Benim.
Sure.
Like,
I think, but Cansu was. Is,
okay.
No, go
just
ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Like you are the host, you can go ahead.
Okay, but it's a little bit out of topic maybe. It's about Kubrick's movie, not 2001, but Shining. Some theorists believe that he actually shoot this moon landing image, and they're pointing out this movie as a proof that he put some like little things that, for example, numbers 2037. It's this distance between moon and earth, and the other stuff. What do you think about this created image?
Well, as far as I know, I hate to disappoint you about this, but I think it was a prank. Because I also saw that. I saw a mockumentary about this, and yes, and then I think it was on Arte, this German French channel, and I was watching it, and I was shocked, and because Kubrick was already gone by then. I think it was 2006 or 7, something like that. And Mrs. Kubrick was on the broadcast, and many people like Donald Rumsfeld and some prominent people, they were just confessing, they were telling the truth that yes, we just staged these landings, and Kubrick was the responsible guy for this, for shooting the movies. And then at the very end of the film, of the mockumentary, there was a funny music there, like the ones in the Woody Allen films, at the end of Woody Allen films, a nice orchestral music. And then it says, April Fool's Day. It was the 1st of April, the broadcasting date of this mockumentary. So I am afraid it's a prank, and but it is also very interesting for people to link Kubrick's talents in shooting the films, in science fiction films, with the actual moon landings. It is. I find that interesting, I have to confess, yes. But I mean, the rest is, as far as I know,
it's very hard to distinguish the reality and the fiction now.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, yeah. Yes, I know this because I met some people from the the Apollo program, and they know what they're doing, and it makes sense. And I myself is convinced that they were there, and they will go there again, because some my previous teammates are now working on an actual project to build a station which will fly around the moon, and the NASA has plans to go back to moon soon, like in 3 or 4 years, I think. They will land back on the moon. So
interesting. So you have astronaut friends, do you?
Well, I cannot call
Almost.
them friends. Yeah, but we met astronauts in the process of these designs that we were making for. We were working on for European Space Agency. They were inviting them to give us their feedbacks. So it's so strange. They
User
look at your
experience.
drawings.
That's nice.
Yes,
yeah.
they look at your drawings and they say, well, no, if you just design it like this, then I cannot keep eye contact with my friends. They say.
Mm.
This was the one of the crucial things that just I still recall. All of the astronauts, we just spoke to a couple of them. All of them were asking for eye contact. The possibility for eye contact, optical lines throughout the habitats. So they were asking for this, the opportunity, and they were also asking for places for some places which would they call places for four-eye chats. They want to speak to people in private, and they would like to have some corners, some chit chat corners. So it is a sort of pendulum that swings between the high privacy, and collectivity, let's say, inside the vehicle. So I mean, it's pretty convincing, and you see that it's just very human what they're asking for. So it's so real, and it's about to arrive.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. It was really...
İsmail Bey'in bir sorusu vardı galiba.
Okay, like I want to comment on the things that you compare the building and the architecture and the space things. I think the point is the extremity makes the things perfect, because like when you are talking about the space and you need to think every detail, and when there's an like air leakage or something and you are dead, and because of the weak side of the architecture is like when you have a problem you will not be dead, like if it's not a structure, if it's not an earthquake. And like the problems are the small when we are talking about the buildings. And also I want to like for example when I think about the extremity, I think when we face some extreme problems, like we challenge ourselves and we develop our skills. Like for example, like the example that comes my mind is like Zayed's research center in Abu Dhabi. Like it has very complex shapes, right? Because I think they are dealing with high sun exposures. Like they were trying to create more shaded areas. Like when they are, I think they analyze sun paths and etc. And they go that shape. Like maybe some of the people the building, and also like there's a moving facade building by Norman Foster. I think it's in China. Like when we deal with and these kind of extreme situations, like we develop our limits, and that's why we are progressing to better future.
Well,
also,
yes,
like
I see your point.
Like when the salon announced this meeting, and like I look at Kürşad Hoca's Instagram page, and like I saw the aircraft they are developing. And like for example, when you think that aircraft, when there's a problem, it will fall down and you will be dead again. And that's why in architecture, I think we are not so we don't need to be so precise. But when we face an extremity, our precision level will be higher. Also, like I want to add a little anecdote, something like I'm an engineer and architect, and one of my engineering professors that are teaching our the strength of the materials and the statics and etc. courses, like he always says that when he talks about construction, it's not a rocket science.
Yes. Yeah, this is not rocket science. You're not splitting the atom, so
yeah,
the margins are larger. Yeah, well, extremities makes the things perfect, yes, and beautiful, like in machine aesthetics. I see your point. Yes, well, yes, and since the future will be full of extremities, well, we can deduce that the architecture will play along. Yeah.
Thank you for a great talk, Kürşad Hocam.
Thank you for your valuable comments. And well,
yeah, thank you for your time. I think we have to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hope to see you in future, in some future.
Bye bye.
Today's. Ciao.
Adios.
Görüşürüz. Katılan herkese
Bye bye.
teşekkürler.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Görüşürüz.
Teşekkürler, görüşürüz.